All right, welcome to another episode of Medicine Mondays. I am yours truly, Dr. Pierre, your favorite board certified internist, host of Medicine Mondays, as well as Real Physician Reacts. That's our live show we do every Thursday, especially when I'm not working, every Thursday, where we just kind of give our social commentary. And this week, we got a good discussion, good talk today, right? The title of the episode is How to Make an Impact Really Despite the Obstacles, right? And I want to talk about it from the position of the physician, right? Me, personally. And when I kind of fast forward here in year 2022, and kind of think about everything that's happened just in a short span since this pandemic, and where has the position of the physician been before said pandemic, during the pandemic, and after. And obviously, we're still in the pandemic, but when I say after, more here in the United States, where we've kind of started to make the mental transition for sure. And when you see kind of the governments and the businesses and everything else kind of trying to get back to what a normal life may look like moving forward, and kind of think about what our journey has been like as a physician and what has been our place. Like when I was in elementary school. I'll break it. I'll go a little bit earlier. So when I was in elementary school, thinking about what I wanted to do, I always knew like, hey, like I like this guy at the time, Dr. Gaston. Like I'm going to be a doctor, right? I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be like Dr. Gaston, because I saw the impact that he had on just my community of Haitian residents here in South Florida, Palm Beach County specifically. So that was my goal. That was my dream. I was like, all right, I'm going to be like Dr. Gaston, right? Because even though I didn't recognize that the impact was there, I knew something for some reason clicked. And I couldn't think of myself other than being a physician, other than being Dr. Pierre, because that's what Dr. Gaston did for me. So fast forward, again, trials, tribulations, I made it, yay. And we get to a point where now as a physician, the position that I worked to aspire to wasn't all that was cracked up to be in comparison when I was looking on the outside. When I was looking on the inside, I was like, well, it's not as great. Not to say that I would trade it for a different profession. Definitely not the case, right? I don't know what I would do if I was not a physician, because honestly, growing up, that's all I thought about. But as I became a physician and I seen what was happening on the inside, and more importantly, how the outside looked at us, I realized that the outside as a whole didn't really look at the profession of physician as I did growing up looking at Dr. Gaston, right? Like all of a sudden I realized that, they weren't necessarily welcoming me with open arms, and, they weren't happy that I was there, and they didn't necessarily want to hear any struggles or concerns I may have, because they figured, hey, you're a physician, you should be good. Like chill over there, relax. And then comes the pandemic. And then immediately we recognize just the level of importance being the physician was, especially as a hospital physician, one who takes care of patients in the most dire need when they're the most sick, being on the front lines. And obviously a term front lines was never relegated to the healthcare profession. It was always kind of the military discussion, the front lines in the battlefield, right? Like those words, those terms are always kind of pushed towards our military brethren. But once the pandemic hit and you realize that the world stopped, and the reason why the world stopped is because you had this new virus that was causing so much trouble that we had no questions, but the only answers that we knew were that we needed physicians and healthcare workers all down the board to take care of them. So immediately, like our position was lifted, right? All of a sudden, people recognize and realize, like, oh my God, like, yeah, we need to take care of our physicians and our healthcare workers. We need to look out for them. We need to respect them. I joke and jokingly say it, but I never used to have access to healthcare discounts. There were no healthcare discounts for physicians. Military, sure. Again, like I said, I got a family in the military, so my military folks watching this, don't kill me. But like, there was no discounts for the healthcare physician. There was no, oh, hey, I'm a doctor. Can I, like, that wasn't a thing until it realized that society wasn't going to move if those who were on now the new term front lines were willing to go to battle. And that's what happened with healthcare workers and physicians alike. Like, we ran to it, right? It's always one of those things I talk about in the hospital setting, where when you hear a code blue, there are certain people who get fearful and there are certain people who run towards it. When there's a fire, there's certain people who run towards it. And that's what the physicians were, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. And what I seen very, very, very quickly was that our impact just across society as a whole was finally being recognized that, like, oh my God, like, we gotta like thank God for the physician. It was probably the best time, in hindsight, right? As a physician, because at that time, our position was exalted, our expertise was not only recognized, but sought after. I started getting discounts everywhere. Everything was all good. But then when you fast forward after 6 months, after a year and a half, almost 2 years, and you start to see society begin to try to move on, unfortunately, with them moving on, they've kind of said, hey, you know what? Like, that position we gave you, we're kind of taking that back. And as a physician, you could definitely be, especially a physician, healthcare worker. I use it interchangeably, but a lot of times, like, obviously in my discussion, I'm going to be talking about physician because I'm a physician. You could be taken aback, recognizing that, like, oh my God, they don't love me no more. Like, you're like, oh my God, what happened to the point where the discount started going away? Like, it wasn't even a permanent discount. Like, there was time, like, they're like, we won't even name the stores. They're not sponsoring nothing. So we won't name them, but like, there's stores that would have certain hours of shopping that I could go to because I was a physician, healthcare worker, like all these things that were so great that just kind of went away because, society said, you know what, that obstacle that was there is really, it's still there, but it's not as big as we thought it would be. It's not as big anymore. So because it's not big anymore, we don't really need you to kind of do much of the heavy lifting anymore. So we're good. Like, and you should be good too. So they kind of, not only did they kind of take away some of that, the love that they had for us, right? Some people even started replacing it with a level of discontent and even more importantly, hate. It's one of the reasons why I started the whole Real Physician React series, because I recognized that there was a significant amount of this population who are at least one of the most vocal, especially here online, who had no problem continually working to undermine the physician, the scientist, the healthcare worker across the board. And I knew that if I, wasn't going to, I knew I wasn't going to be quiet about that anymore. Because I learned my lesson the first time. When I was coming up, I learned that, hey, you know what, like, I guess this is, I just figured this is how it has to be, as a physician, not really respected, not really loved. And then the pandemic came, people recognized, like, oh my God, we really, really do love them. Like, come back, like, love us again. And then once the pandemic started dying down again, people went right back to kind of the norm. So I said, I'm not going to go back to that norm, right? Like, it just ain't going to happen. So like, I definitely made it a point to be much more kind of proactive in our approach of really recognizing where the healthcare worker, where the physician, where the scientist was in this grand scheme of things of what we call life. And sometimes a lot of that can get lost with everything that's happening, right? When you are trying to do better, when you're trying to educate, when you're trying to make an impact to your community, shout out to my Lunch Learn community out there. When you're trying to make an impact to their community, sometimes that can be it can be a little frustrating to know that some random Joe Blow out there can say one random statement to try to discredit what you're doing. And I was on a clubhouse this past week or so with a few colleagues of mine, great colleagues. In fact, a couple of them have been guests on the show, right? So again, I keep good company. And I made a remark because it hit me that here we are 2 years later in this room, in this clubhouse room, educating the community, answering questions and doing all of this on our free time. Essentially, we're saying like, you know what? I'm going to take the time that I have to dedicate to educate and to elevate any conscience that may need to be lifted. Because like that's what's inbred in us, right? That's what's in our heart. And I love it because I remember starting out on Clubhouse almost like after like a year and a half or so ago when it first started and having to sit in those same rooms trying to educate people like, hey, there's this new virus. There's some issues. We should be concerned. Hey, you know what? It actually is a problem. Hey, here are some vaccines. Hey, I remember educating people all along the way, and it could be very deflating when you don't necessarily get the response that you expect in return. It could be deflating. And I know a lot of my healthcare workers who just say, you know what? I'm done. Like, I'm not doing this no more. Like, I'm not going to continually put myself in a position where I could be harming myself. I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm not going in as stress-free as possible. I'm not going to keep on doing that without getting any gratitude back. And you see, and we've talked about here, especially on the podcast and Lunch Learn, we've talked about medical burnout on so many different levels. I can assure you that this COVID pandemic has definitely sped up a lot of that discussion. I can assure you that I'm going to have plenty of colleagues who may have, waited until year 5 or 10 to start thinking about something else. And now they're like, you know what? I need to start thinking about something else now. It's so lovely, right? It's so lovely when you do, right, get the positive feedback that you deserve, right? Again, great friend of mine reached out, kind of said his amazing remarks regarding one of our recent episodes, and it just helped energize me right back again. Not to say that I was like on a low battery, ready to say like I'm done. That wasn't the case, but it's good to be reminded that there are people out there who are continually touched by what you do, who are continually energized by what you do, who continually wait to kind of hear what your next word is, what your direction is, to kind of help guide what they do in their journey. Especially because the audience that typically follows, me, especially the Lunch Learn community, we're fairly younger, right? It's, when I do polls every now and then, I know I have a more predominantly female audience. But then, from an age bracket standpoint, between, again, about 23 to 35-ish, right? Around that range where a majority of the people who typically listen to me fall in. And that's typically the range where we're not necessarily studying right? We're not really caring about our health as much because majority of the time we're usually the most healthiest, right? We're usually not on any medication. We're usually not. But what typically occurs is we're starting to be old enough where we recognize like our family members, right? We're recognizing our aunts, our uncles, our moms, our dads, grandma, grandpa. We're starting to notice health problems within our family, extended family, and just around us. That makes us a little bit more cognizant. Again, sometimes we still have that kind of superhero complex, which is probably why I have more female than male audience, at least at this point. But like you start recognizing it, right? And a lot of people have taken upon themselves to listen to Medicine Mondays or Real Physician Reacts or just a podcast or read a blog post that we do, just to try to get some information, just so they're as adept as possible, right? Because again, I can't be everyone's physician. I know that. But one of the reasons why I decided to step behind a camera and start talking, this is going on. Oh my God. We see 2014, almost like 6-7 years ago, right? Like, which is crazy long time. But one of the reasons why I started doing that is because I recognize that even though I can't take care of every patient one-on-one, the words that I spit out, right? The educational lessons that I give, that is enough for someone. Again, we talk about the motto here, Empower Yourself for Better Health. That is enough for someone to say, you know what? I heard what Dr. Barry said. Let me go talk to my doctor. Let me see if my doctor is kind of on the same page, just to make sure, because at the end of the day, it's all about our health, right? So again, it's just one of those things that you have to kind of remember, right? And especially now, I want to focus especially to my healthcare workers, my physicians for sure, especially my content creators out there who may run into different levels of frustration because we're not necessarily getting the results or as immediate the result that we're looking for. Understand that it is a day by day process, minute by minute process, and you may not always see the impact that you're having. So despite, the lack of admiration, despite the lack of, again, a popular swell of, support, from the world, right? Whatever you're looking for, despite that, understand that if you can look into that camera, look into your phone. I remember I'm not that old, right? I used to do this all on the phone. I'd be sitting there recording myself. I used to do this all on the phone. If you can do that and recognize that, or you're talking in a mic, right? And someone can listen to you on a podcast, or you write a blog post, right? And someone reads your blog, right? If you could do that, if you could just continue to work on affecting one person for the positive, better change, the snowballing effects that's going to happen, right, will always be greater, right? And that's what you have to remember, right? So even though the physician, and more importantly, probably, definitely, especially during this time, even though we're not as in vogue as we were when the pandemic first started, understand that from one physician colleague here, you guys continue to remain as extremely as important as the day you decided you wanted to be blank, whatever that blank is, and decide to step in this healthcare field and work as a doctor, man. It's like I said, I just had some words that I just wanted to probably guess. I was going to do a guess, but you know what? I think I can just do this out right off the top. All right. I think I can do this talk right off the top because it was just something that kind of just been energizing me, especially as I just kind of look around and I get this admiration and I'm looking at my colleagues and I see all the amazing things that they're doing, writing books, dropping podcasts. I see all the amazing things that having families. I see all the amazing things that they're doing. And it continues to inspire me to want to get up and do more. Right. That's always the goal. Always the goal. What can we do to inspire someone else to want to get up and keep going and do more despite of it all? So again, I am yours truly, again, Dr. Barry Pierre. Thank you for, catching this week's kind of introspective discussion on, making sure that your impact counts, and understand that, again, it doesn't have to be an impact that affects a whole community, that affects tens of thousands of people. As long as it affects one for the greater, you are doing a masterful job. So you guys be blessed, and I'm going to see you guys next week.